In South Africa, police today ambushed rock-throwing youths with rifle fire from a government truck. There had been scattered violent incidents in the Athlone mixed-race neighborhood all day, and finally authorities returned fire without warning. Watch the top of this red truck. Three youths were killed by police bullets, another three were wounded. Residents said wounded people hid in their homes, fearful of being arrested if they left for medical help. Said one witness, it was like a war out there.
And in South Africa, there are funerals for blacks killed during protests. Police usually agree to keep a low profile, even though the funerals themselves often become demonstrations of black anger. At a funeral today, there was no trouble, at least not until two policemen climbed off their armored truck and walked into the crowd. The policemen were not seeking out black activists. They were going after television cameramen, even though the cameramen were there quite legally, since this black township, Mamelodi, is outside the state of emergency. One policeman grabbed a CBS cameraman. The policeman drew his pistol. A freelance cameraman, Brian Tilley, was also dragged down the street at gunpoint.
In a fairly peaceful funeral, when police entered the crowd, they began smashing television equipment and eventually threatened to fire a journalist. Officials say they will not allow any bad press to come out of South Africa.
Bells were chiming this afternoon at the University of Vermont for convocation, the traditional ceremony marking the start of the school year. As faculty members prepared for their procession to the chapel, another group was organizing across campus. These students and faculty members were preparing for their own march to urge the university to divest itself of all investments in South Africa.
One of the functions of a convocation is to set a proper intellectual and moral note for the opening of the school year. And in that sense, I think this procession represents an appropriate addition to the convocation.
You couldn't miss them, the growing core of activists, organized, vocal, and committed to making UVM's Board of Trustees change its mind and sell off investments in companies doing business in South Africa. One of their targets, UVM President Laddie Kaur, about 75 students staging a sit-in and meeting inside Kaur's office. The president wasn't there, but students moved in anyway. The students drew up a list of demands, namely that trustees totally divest within 6 months.
We are also starting to investigate initiating legislation to change the makeup of the Board of Trustees to make them more responsible to the community and not necessarily to their own corporate interests.
And we think it's very important that the trustees make a decision for total divestiture this weekend.
Trustees are now making up their minds on how they'll vote Saturday to decide what UVM will do with their South African interests. But Laddie Kaur says the final decision won't be affected by protests like these.
Trustees have refused students' demands to divest nearly $5 million from businesses connected to South Africa. The meeting, which started slowly and lasted more than 4 hours, ended in a shouting and shoving match when students tried to disrupt an executive session. Divestment isn't the only issue on the trustees' agenda, but ever since their vote against total divestment last September 7th, it has attracted nearly all of their attention. At that meeting, the board voted to sell $2.7 million in stock, but keep more than $4 million invested in companies like IBM, which do business in South Africa. Student activists charged that the key votes against divestment came from 4 trustees who had ties with IBM. They charged conflict of interest. A special committee examined that charge and concluded that while all 4 trustees acted in good faith, 2 of them, IBM lobbyist William Gilbert and IBM employee Jack Burke, should not vote on the issue again. But this morning, the full board refused to accept the recommendation that Burke and Gilbert abstain from future divestment votes. Trustees did agree that the rules spelling out conflicts of interest need to be tightened up, but Burke and Gilbert were permitted to take part in today's vote. Kaur's proposal for divestiture over 2 years failed, and so did a motion to table the whole issue until a later meeting. The atmosphere was tense as about 100 students and faculty members watched a roll call vote on total divestment.
9 for, 12 against.
The Board of Trustees quickly went into executive session to discuss other issues, but the situation quickly deteriorated, as this unedited tape shows.
What are they afraid of? What's their problem?
We want